from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the program. We're live and national. Here is the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. If you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give me a call. Looking forward to speaking with you, and hope everybody had a good weekend. There's like always, lots of news. Of course, the left is freaking out. Reports left, right, and center about the bloodbath that's happening on Wall Street. You would think that we've all lost our shirts, but yet if you check your stocks, you're not really losing your shirt. It's down a couple of points. And when you look at it, you know, where we are today, right, down 5 points maybe, versus where we were a year ago today, I think we're still up 8 or 9% on all of them, on the S&P, on the Dow, so on the NASDAQ. So what's all the doom and gloom about? Well, because they need something to cry about. They totally want to make sure, and when I say they, I mean the left within the media, the critics of Donaldus Magnus, El Trompito, the 45th president of these United States, and now the 47th. They want to make sure that you're deathly afraid of this man, that he is a threat to democracy. He's a threat to your pocketbook. He's a threat to the world spinning every day, right? His first go-round, it was, you got to be afraid. He's going to start World War III. Turns out Trump is a big pacifist, doesn't like to make money on wars. So now what? Oh, well, he's a Russian agent. Oh, well, he's this. Oh, and he's that. Bottom line is, look, the Doge father himself tweeted, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, that it was sort of inevitable that we were going to see a recession. I didn't say it, he did. Right? He put a tweet out, and we talked about it. I think we even brought on E.J. Antoni that night. And I said, well, what's going on with Elon Musk saying there's going to be a recession? He explained that there was a lot of spending that Biden did on the way out that could create some inflationary pressures that would hit around between March and June. If you don't believe me, just go to the website, richvaldez.com, search for E.J. Antoni, look for one of our many conversations, and listen to it. And he said there's a possibility it doesn't have to happen, but that there's a possibility it could, because when you print money and you have excessive government spending, you get inflation, and inflation can trigger this. So this is what I understood from every economist I've spoken with, is that in this time that they predicted between March and June, more or less, give or take a month, right? So it could be between April and July. But in this first year, in this 2025 year of the Trump presidency, as things start to go low, buy, and buy. And I have been looking around, because I want a piece of property in Florida, right? Preferably in the Brickell area. But why am I the only one that's looking at it this way? Well, I'll tell you why, because this is how the media works. If it bleeds, it leads. It's what they do. Just imagine when there's a tragedy, right? Just think of the birth of 24/7 cable news. Outside of CNN, all the rest of the channels were kind of, maybe the Fox News channel, but I don't know if they were 24 hours at that time. But after 9/11, the whole lot of them were. News became a thing for everybody. Everybody started to do their news junkie thing, right? Now, many people were already talk radio junkies. I get it. We're the pioneers. But all that to be said for this reason. They want you scared. They want you concerned. They want you to tune in. They want to give you crazy analysis from all sorts of wackos, like former Congressman Joe Walsh, that say all sorts of crazy things, because ultimately this is how they do their thing. Now, listen, I am good for an occasional, provocative or inflammatory statement. It's true. But I'm not necessarily, an expert in that, right? I'm really not. I'm not an expert bomb thrower. I wish I was. If it sounds like I'm throwing bombs, it's probably because I really believe that, right? That's genuinely my take on the issue. If I say Democrats are destroying the fabric of America with this type of policy, it's because I think that they're really going to destroy the fabric of our country. And for those who are paying attention, a lot of the patchwork of our country has been damaged. And I think we're working to rebuild it. Right? We went from a place where we had somewhat normalcy, disagreement amongst parties over truth, to what is truth and what is a woman. Right? So the needle has definitely moved, and not in a good way. But I mentioned Congressman Joe Walsh. He's a former Republican who had a radio show, and I used to listen. I thought he was actually a decent radio guy until he just lost it. I don't know if it was the election of Trump or the advent of Trump, even when Trump was running. But something happened to him somewhere where he lost it. And I guess he was never really a conservative, but he was tolerable on the air. And then he just went haywire. And he became kind of, angry and hate-filled, if I'm being honest. Anyway, he was on MSNBC this weekend, and he's got a great news story. Trump is going to try and steal himself a third term. Listen to this.
This is scary shit, pardon me, on a Sunday morning. And Lindsey Graham there, a United States Senator, you don't joke about that.
Right.
Trump's what, 78, 79 years old? I have no doubt that if Trump could, he would try to run again. I think, Michael, the biggest failure of all of us during this Trump era has been the failure of imagination. Mm-hmm. We have not imagined how bad and how low he'd go. He tried to overthrow an American election 4 years ago. I have no doubt that he could try to stop the midterm elections. If he's physically able, he may try to run again in 28. This is really scary.
So there you have it. This is really scary. Now, I don't know about you. I am not scared in the least that Donaldus Magnus is trying to run for a third term. He just got here, right? January 20th. Today's March 10th. So in 10 more days, it'll be 2 months. 2 months. Most of the time, they give something called a honeymoon period, right? Remember that? The first 100 days. Not even the first 3 months, first 100 days. You get 100 days to set the course for your agenda. And, that's when you do your addressing the media. Here I am. These are my major policy things. That's the expectation that the media gives everyone but El Trompito. For him, they want to change the standard. So now you've got former congressmen that are coming out of the woodwork saying things like he's going to get himself a third term. Now, what's funny about that, in my opinion, and there's so much I want to talk about here, but I'm spending time on this because I think it really is stupid. We have not, at least I have not. And again, I'm 46, so I don't have decades upon decades of experience. But the decades I've been around, I've never seen a political movement with such gravitas. Maybe, but for Marxism, right? Those guys have a lot of gravitas. They're able to recruit and they're vibrant. But on the Republican side, where there's some conservatives involved, I've never seen. This is the Tea Party on absolute steroids. Now, yes, it is infused with populism and a lot of disaffected Democrats that like what Trump has to offer because they can't stand what the Democrats are offering. And Trump has been very effective in creating a big tent that is welcoming to these people, right? So welcoming that he's got the former vice chair of the DNC, someone who endorsed Bernie Sanders for president of the United States, Tulsi Gabbard as his DNI, right? She jumped ship and said the Democrat Party doesn't represent her values. Right? It was after they called her a Russian agent. It's like their go-to. You've got political royalty, right? The dynastic tradition of the Kennedys has now jumped aboard the MAGA train. RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy. So if anybody could say they've created a coalition and they have a bipartisan mandate, if you will, it's Donaldus Magnus, El Trompito. Donald Trump has done an amazing job rebuilding the Republican Party and being inclusive, if you will. So why do they beat him up? Why do they attack so much? Because he's been effective. That's exactly why. And they're going to throw as many bombs as they can to distract you, to scare you, because they don't want you to see someone that could beat them at every turn when they're doing everything they can to throw everything at them but the kitchen sink. Anyway, amigos, I want to talk about what's going on in Iran. I want to talk about a bunch of things tonight, not the least of which is a police officer was shot and killed in Newark, New Jersey by what's being reported as a 14-year-old boy. We'll talk about that and a bunch of other stuff. I got plenty, so keep it locked right here. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
President Trump has sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader seeking a new deal to restrain Tehran's nuclear program, warning that otherwise military intervention might be necessary. From a Fox News interview, Trump says, quote, "I've written them a letter saying I hope you're going to negotiate because if we have to go in militarily, it's going to be a terrible thing." Speaking to reporters from the Oval Office Friday, the commander-in-chief did say that, quote, "We have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon, very, very soon."
Not mincing many words there, President Trump putting Iran on notice that this needs to be taken seriously, all but threatening military action. And this is as serious as I've heard these conversations get. I want to get to the bottom of it. What is going on with respect to Iran's nuclear sites and everything else that's happening in that region? And to get a perspective on that, I want to speak with the Deputy Director of the Washington Office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI. He's a whistleblower on the Iranian nuclear sites, and he's the author of The Iran Threat, Alireza Jafarzadeh. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Rich. I'm so happy to be on your show.
Thank you. So tell me, you just heard this report and you heard President Trump's comments. They seem pretty strong. I think when you're dealing with regimes like Iran, which I'm sure you know well, I think you have to be very strong. Do you think that there is a genuine potential, or at least a desire from Iran to go to war with the United States?
Well, first of all, I'm sure you're referring to the Iranian regime when you refer to Iran. Obviously, what the regime is trying to do is to see how they can survive. The whole agenda behind developing nuclear weapons, as far as the regime is concerned, is to use that as leverage to stay in power, to guarantee their survival. The same thing is behind their terror operations, the terror network in the region. They're spending a huge amount of money and resources hiring, training, and arming their proxies in the region, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to the Houthis in Yemen to the Shia militias in Iraq, all of them with the intention of what they call creating strategic depth for the regime so that they can stay in power in Tehran. So the last thing they want is to face a confrontation that they cannot sustain. Of course, in order to avoid it, they make promises. They have a history of beguiling the world, saying, okay, let's sit down and negotiate. And while you're negotiating, they stab you in the back. They move the program forward. They take hostages, make you pay them money to get the hostages back, only to go back and take more. They have done the same thing with the nuclear weapons program. You know, when we first exposed the nuclear sites in 2002, the program was in the very preliminary stages. That program could have been stopped at the time, but the Western nations, especially the EU3, the three countries of the European Union, they decided to give concessions to the Iran regime, hoping that by giving them money and basically they legitimize the nuclear weapons program of the regime. And look where we are some 23 years later. The regime is now far more advanced while they were negotiating and getting money. That's why I think it's important to understand that Tehran's agenda is not to give up, nuclear weapons. Rather, they want to get concessions. It's very interesting to see how Tehran reacted to what the president of the United States said just a few days ago. They came back and said, well, we're not going to abandon our program, but let's sit down and talk so we can figure out which parts that we can, So they want you to sit down at the table, and they want to take away the wind out of your sail. They want to take away the momentum for, continued sanctions on the Iran regime, and they want to take away the momentum at the UN Security Council to snap back all the sanctions on the Iran regime, because they're clearly in violation of the commitments they made in 2015. And remember, there is a clock right here. But come October, all of those restrictions at the UN are going to be removed. So if you want to do anything, you have to do it now and snap back the sanctions. Otherwise, the regime will buy time and just drag you into another cycle of negotiations. And before you know it, it's too late.
Folks, we're on with Alireza Jafarzadeh from the NCRI, the National Council of Resistance to Iran. And Alireza, I think you're right that, they're trying to buy time. And again, this is not unique to Iran, for example. This is unique, I think, to many politicians who don't want to do anything. They call it lip service, and they just say, sure, we're happy to have a conversation about X, Y, and Z. And nothing really gets done because they're buying more time to enrich more uranium and position themselves to hurt more people, in my opinion. So I want to get your thoughts on that. Plus, I want to talk about your book. And I also want to learn a little bit about your whistleblowing. But before we do that, I want you to tell us a little bit about who joined you at a recent event. Of all people, I think it's somebody interesting to me. He's a friend of mine, a friend of this program, America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And we're going to take a quick pause right here. But when we come back, I want you to let everybody that's listening know how America's Mayor is involved in the resistance to Iran with NCRI and all of the work that you're doing. So, folks, keep it locked right here. We're coming right back with Alireza Jafarzadeh, Deputy Director of National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI, and me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company straight till midnight, 1 a.m. in some areas. We're live, we're national. You know the phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I'll be taking your calls live right after this, so make sure you give us a call. But right now, I want to continue our conversation with Alireza Jafarzadeh, the head of the Washington office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI. And they were part of a rally that happened this weekend. And like I mentioned prior to the break, somebody that's a familiar voice, a familiar face to many of us, America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani, pulled up to this event, and here's what he had to say.
So all of you in Ashraf 3 and in Iran hearing this, these are the people in America with you. With you because you can do this. You were real close to doing it in 2020, 2019 and 2020. So I don't know. You're not going to need American troops. You're not going to need European troops, if there are such things. And you're not going to need anything but yourself and Madam Rajavi and the NCRI.
That, of course, again, America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani speaking at the rally that occurred this weekend in Washington, D.C. Our guest, Alireza Jafarzadeh from the NCRI that you just heard shouted out by America's Mayor. Alireza, tell us give us more context on what Mayor Giuliani was talking about and how he was received by the crowd.
Well, Mayor Giuliani, of course, has been very well known to the people of Iran, not just the people of the United States, because they have seen him, known him for standing on the right side, for standing against the ruthless rulers of Iran and standing on the side of the people and those who want to bring about change in Iran. So when he got on the stage, he faced several, thousands of Iranian Americans who had come from all over the United States, the nation's capital, from California to Florida, from Illinois to Texas, from Massachusetts to Florida, to everywhere. Over 40 states, people had come. Many of them very young people, and a lot of them had lost, family members. So they were very committed, very supportive. And Mayor basically responded to the message that was right before he spoke, came via satellite from the leader of this movement, Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. You heard her name mentioned by the mayor, because Mrs. Rajavi said that, this is the time for change in Iran, and we have all the elements that is needed to bring about change. We have the population that is overwhelmingly opposed to the regime and supportive of change. We have the parliament in exile, the NCRI. We have a clear platform for the future of Iran, known as the 10-point plan for the future of Iran, that says, legitimacy only comes from the ballot box, not, through what the Ayatollahs claim, the God and the theocracy, or the Shah's dictatorship. That she says that there's going to be gender equality, there's going to be separation of religion and state, freedom of religion, free market economy, peace in the Middle East, and a non-nuclear republic Iran. That's the kind of agenda that she introduced. And she said, when it comes to change in Iran, really nothing is needed, whether it's the United States or Europe. We have all the elements we need to bring about change. All we actually need is, the condemnation of the Iranian regime, cutting off money and resources to the regime, which they had gotten so much of it over the past several administrations, saying that don't give legitimacy to the Ayatollahs, recognize the right of the people of Iran to bring down the regime on their own, recognize the right of those on the ground that are confronting the Revolutionary Guards on a day-to-day basis. And then Mayor Giuliani basically resonated that, saying that, he agrees that this is the time for change. He said that you don't really need boots on the ground or money appropriated. None of that. It's just basically you can do it on your own. It's our responsibility to support you. And that's exactly what the mayor has done over the years. And then interestingly, once the rally was over, they started marching towards the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. And Mayor joined, in the early stages of the march and just waving the flag, saying that Iran will be free. And that's really the message and the enthusiasm that you saw there. And that's why it's so important for the administration, for President Trump, for those, who are involved in the policy decisions here in Washington, whether it's on the Capitol Hill, but particularly in the White House and the State Department, to realize that change is absolutely necessary. If we want to see an end to the nuclear weapons program of the Iran regime, we need to see change in Iran based on all the experience in the past. Interestingly, right in front of the march, there was a huge sign that read, "No to a nuclear Iran, yes to a democratic, secular republic form of the government." And that's really, they need to realize that the prospect for ending all of the threats of the Iran regime has never been so great. The regime has never been so weak because we have lost all the proxies in the region. They're rejected by their own population inside the country. And that's why the policy of the U.S. could make a huge difference because,
now,
and that's the whole message.
Would you say that, and I tend to agree with most of what you're saying, but I think that some critics would argue that the regime has never been stronger because they're so much closer to having nuclear capability. What would you say to that?
Well, certainly that's correct that they have never been so close to building the bomb. And that's the only thing that the regime is actually, hanging on to it. And that's why they're not giving it up. But in every other aspect, the regime is rotten to the core. When you have a country that is economy is just in huge shambles, and it's going to get worse once the sanctions are going to be imposed, and they lost a lot of the clout that they had in the region. I mean, those proxies they had, Hezbollah and, the Houthis and others. And so really, who thought that Assad, the biggest ally of Tehran, could collapse in 11 days with all the money and resources that the regime had spent?
Overnight.
Who thought that? Overnight, and who thought that Hezbollah leaders could have one after the other. So that's why the nuclear issue certainly is giving them the strength and the only really serious leverage left for them.
Their last
you want to
leg.
take it away. Yes, the last leg. I like that term. So you want to take it away from them, but the only way you can really actually do it is to help bringing down the whole thing. Here is an opportunity with no boots on the ground, no appropriation of money, no arms, none of that. You can see change. That just imagine, Rich, if you have and when you have a free democratic republic Iran that is non-nuclear, that is non-belligerent, that becomes the center of peace and love and compassion and democracy, how that impacts the whole region, how that impacts the whole globe. I mean, it basically drives down the epicenter of terror and instability in the region. And that's why there's a lot at stake. And of course, the people of Iran, they've been paying the price. They want to see freedom for, close to 90 million population. But think about how many millions and hundreds of millions of people around the world, if not, billions perhaps, who are benefiting from a change in Iran. Because since the mullahs took over power and started, becoming the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, they changed everything in the world. And they changed the whole region. And that's why, this rally had that message. And I hope we can galvanize more and more attention on the solution, because everybody knows the problem, but they're not paying attention to the solution. And that's why, a role of Congress, the role of the administration, the public opinion. I mean, your show is so important. I just heard President Trump talking about your show. It's very important to educate the public and the American public know that there is a solution. And this movement, the NCRI, is a huge asset. And that's why the regime is attacking us left and right, both in terms of, the public opinion, social media. They're trying to target us, terror our people, killing our members and supporters inside Iran and everywhere else. But I think whatever the regime has done hasn't been effective. It's too little too late now to stop, anything that is really shaping up in Iran. The way for democracy and for change in Iran is unstoppable.
Alireza Jafarzadeh, Deputy Director at NCRI in Washington. And I want you quickly to let everybody know, how do they get a copy of your book, The Iran Threat?
Well, it's available on Amazon or any bookstores online. You can get it. Also, if they want to reach me, I'm on social media. You can get to at NCRIUS. That's our all our social media platforms, and also my own handle on X or Twitter is at @A_, my last name, which is JAFARZADEH. And I love to interact with anyone who's interested. And I think we're going to have a lot of busy times ahead of us in a good way.
I agree, and I'd like to continue our discussion as well, because I mean, while the focus was specifically on what you guys are doing, to counter the Iranian threat, I think there's also what carries on, right? The influence that they continue to have. What happens with Hamas? What happens with Hamas and the IDF? What will Netanyahu do? How does this proceed in Gaza? So as we get updates on that, I'd love for you to come back in a couple of weeks and give us an update.
Sure. We have a very chaotic situation in the whole region, and of course at the heart of all of that is the Iranian regime. Iran, the head of the stake of war and terror lies in Tehran. So does the solution.
Amen to that. I hear you, brother. Alireza Jafarzadeh, Deputy Director in Washington at NCRI. I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be on your show, Rich.
My pleasure. And amigos, we continue straight ahead with your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We're going to go to your phone calls right now, 833-482-5337. And I want to quickly just play something for you, because I'm always scrolling through Twitter and through Instagram and Truth Social. And I saw a video earlier today of somebody we've had on the show a couple of times, the Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson from California. And it's a conversation he's having with a very, very pleasant, very smiley young Muslim woman wearing a hijab. And they're having a conversation about Islam and Christianity. And I thought it was very interesting, if nothing else. And I wish I would have had a little more time. Maybe I could have brought it up with our guests. But I'll bring it up with you guys. Listen to this.
If the Great White Hope accepted Islam, would you accept Islam?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm a Christian.
Have you ever looked into Islam?
I have. But,
and what about Islam?
But just to understand it better, not to be a member of it or anything like that. And the thing that I don't trust about Islam is that you are taught to lie and deceive the Christians and the Jews, and that the Islam people see us as infidels, and their whole mission is to destroy the infidels. And I know that the Muslims want to conquer the world.
Yeah. No one will shy away from that. We believe in like a
why you want to conquer the world?
I actually have a question for you.
So there it is. That was he says that you guys will lie in order to conquer the world, and to label everybody that's a non-believer of Islam an infidel. And she says, yeah, nobody will argue that. And I thought she'd push back a little bit, saying that's not true. We're not going to lie. And I thought that was very interesting. And I've heard this over the years from people who are critical of the religion. And I try not to get into the back and forth on whether, my religion's better than yours and whatnot, because I have my own opinions on that. And this is not a religious show. But I found that particularly interesting, and I want to get some reaction from you all, the American people. Let's go to Greg in Burke, Virginia, WMAL. Greg, go right ahead.
Hey, thanks, Rich. You just basically played something that I was going to say.
What's that?
There is the Muslim will state that an infidel or the person's word does not mean anything to an infidel. So in your conversation about negotiations, even if they agree to not do anything, from a Muslim speaking to an infidel, their word doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. So we shouldn't expect them to hold to their side of a bargain.
Understood. Yeah, and again, I don't, I haven't done the research on this to definitively say that this is factual or not. But here we have a caller saying this, and we also have a woman named Aziza who was in part of Jesse Lee Peterson's interview, and she's the head of something called CollectivelyMarried.com. Apparently, she promotes Muslim polygamy. And I just thought it was very, very interesting, a very interesting conversation that they had. Almost saying, man, I'd like to speak to both of them, honestly. So there you have that, and I appreciate that. I'm going to take a quick pause right here. We're going to get to the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
We call it Open Phones Across America, where we take your calls and get your reactions to everything going on in America at night. I am Rich Valdez, keeping you company till midnight and 1 a.m. in some areas. And I want to go to one of our callers who's been dubbed the Gilla from Manila. Go right ahead, sir.
Yes, Rich, I just wanted to make a comment about the topic of your last guest. There's another organization called United Against a Nuclear Iran. One of the founders is an acquaintance of mine, Barry Rosen, who was held hostage in Iran for over 400 days during the Iranian hostage crisis. And another prominent member who passed on not too long ago was a former senator and vice presidential candidate, Joe Lieberman. And they take it from a different perspective to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons as a way of protecting Israel. That's their
yeah. Well, the reality, Gil, I think you're right. Protecting Israel protects the rest of the world, right? I think, because that's their number one goal. And I remember hearing the chanting of the Iranian parliament when they open it up and they shout "Death to America, death to Israel," calling us the great Satan and Israel the little Satan. And I thought to myself, these people don't sound very friendly. And I'm talking about the mullahs and the supreme leader and those in charge of the regime. So I think you're spot on. It's cool that you know the guy, one of the guys that was held hostage back in the 80s. So thank you for that, Gil. I appreciate it. And how are things in Manila, Philippines?
Oh, they're just fine. We're counting down the days. The whole family will be in the States. Last day
all
of the
in
month.
the States. I can't wait. Less than a month till the Gilla comes to America. Folks, keep it locked right here. It's me, Rich Valdez, coming back with another exciting hour of live programming. 833-4-VALDEZ is the number. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the program. It's 7 minutes after 10 p.m. Eastern Time here in the New York metro area. Our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. We're live, we're national. I'm happy to be here. I am blessed to be on this microphone with you, all the American people. And I want to talk about a bunch of things. I mean, there's a lot of discussion, right? It's Monday. Monday always has a lot of topics, right? Whether it's the LGBTQ and the latest with wokeism, the latest on the international front with Iran, the latest on the international front, the geopolitical front with the NATO countries and all of that mess, and everything happening domestically. Domestically, we're talking domestic politics, domestic finance. I mean, there's so many angles to have stories on, not to mention entertainment, right? There's always the entertainment angle, which I always enjoy. So we're going to get to as much of it as possible. But let me just take a look. I got a little rundown here of a bunch of the big stories of the day. Well, I had one. I promise you I had one. Every now and again, you know, because they know it's live radio, they'll just switch things up on me. They, by they, I mean the deep state. Not they, the media. They, the deep state. Let me see. Here it is. The Midnight Zoo. All right, so the Senate has confirmed the head of the Department of Labor. I believe that is Lori Chavez DeRaymer. Let me see. Hamas says it's willing to hand over Gaza Strip for a 5 to 10 year truce. How about that? I didn't know about that. I should have read that headline earlier. I was busy reading other stuff. The BLM Plaza in D.C. has been dismantled after a House bill has threatened to withhold its city funding. Excuse me. Let me see. There were wildfires in Long Island. My sister lives in Long Island. I texted her, and she said, nah, they were further out by the Hamptons, and she's pretty far out east, but she said nothing happening by her and all is well. So thank God for that. And I mean, these are some crazy ones that I love to just share with you. Florida woman arrested for allegedly slicing a man's face open with Pringles. It's a Pringles can that did that. Let me see here. A man in bed with his lady friend got shot in the leg by who? By the dog. Unbelievable. And let me see. Oh, and one of my favorite TV shows, The Apprentice, seasons 1 through 7 may soon be streaming for the first time on Amazon Video. I actually am a subscriber to Amazon Video. So good, very good. And we'll get to a little bit of today in history, maybe in the top of the next hour. But that's some of the news that we're talking about. And I also want to jump into some other topics, like the debate over LGBTQ and wokeism, as well as the effect that mental health has, or how it's affected when it's time to do fall back, spring forward. Right, which everybody had to do over the weekend yesterday. I was late to church. And then I got to church, and this was all my fault. But they were like, I'm so sorry, but it's, there's no more chairs. And I was like, oh, I don't mind standing. So I go and I stand in the back. And the usher comes to me and says, oh, I'm sorry, you can't stand because we've had a visit from the fire marshal, and they said we have to keep all the aisles clear. So, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. So I go outside. Now I'm angry. I'm like, I've never been thrown out of a church before. and there was 2 spots to sit, but they were like really far in the front and like all the way to the middle. So like I would have been the late guy walking in that would walk halfway down, and then trying to get across the aisle and, hopping over 17 laps to get to the middle of the aisle. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. And I waited, and I just went to the one after. But anyway, that was a first for me. I want to get into some news here because there's plenty to discuss, and we're going to discuss it. But there was a cop that was killed, a Newark police officer, Newark, New Jersey. The reporting is that he was killed by a 14-year-old boy. I'll dig into that a little bit in the next hour because that is really just a very tragic story. A family member, I believe the officer's uncle, blasting the family, saying, you know what, I blame this kid's parents. And so do I, right? When we talk about the effect of not having a father in the home, the effect that poverty has on a community, the effect of not focusing on education at the local level, forget what they're doing in Washington. Just not focusing on education at the local level is really what's detrimental. So I'm going to dig into that in a bit, but just very, very, very sad. There was a couple other stories too. I keep pulling them up and the screen keeps going on me. But hold on, bear with me. Look at this. Oh, this is a really good one. There's one from like 3 weeks ago. I'm part of my ADD on this, but we have to dig into this. Maybe do like a full segment on it. Apparently China has some involvement in Easy Pass in New Jersey. The New Jersey Turnpike Easy Pass people have said, yeah, no, there's a financial interest from a Beijing backed organization that's involved somehow in their, as part of an owner or part of a leasing scenario they have. And I thought, we're just selling everything away, right? And, it's funny, there's these videos of Trump making the rounds, and I actually played the same video 2 or 3 years ago. And it was, and it's an old video. I wasn't breaking news when I did it either, but my point is it's a video of Trump saying, we're letting Japan run roughshod, that we let them do whatever and they get away with everything. And it was about the trade imbalance and, the same stuff he's talking about today. And that was the gist of it then that I was playing. And that's why they're playing it again now, because the tariffs are back. But the point was he was beating up Japan at that time because they were the ones that were trying to buy up all the big buildings in Manhattan. Now it's China that's trying to buy everything up, including New Jersey Easy Pass, which I think should be abolished altogether. But this is the story I wanted to bring up because I thought this was interesting. This is reporting from One America News. Doge says children received $312 million in loans meant for small businesses during the COVID pandemic. So during the pandemic, obviously, there were these loans, the PPP and other loans. And now that they're doing the accounting, they're finding out that there were $312 million in loans meant for small businesses that were sent to children. And this is remarkable because I applied for one of those loans and I didn't get it. I didn't get it at all because I didn't have enough employees. And I'm thinking, how does some kid apply for how does a kid end up getting one of these without even having a company and whatnot? But that's the Department of Government Efficiency revealing that over $300 million in COVID-19 relief loans were granted to children. This came out just yesterday, Sunday. And they're continuing to root out waste, fraud, and corruption in the federal government. Doge reporting that the SBA, the Small Business Administration, made roughly 5,600 loans totaling $312 million to debtors who only listed the owner as 11 years old or younger at the time of the loan. The loans were made in 2020 and 2021 while the world was dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's unclear what they were used for. Now, I remember during COVID, I reported, I didn't report, I'm not a reporter, but I gave my opinion on a report of loans that were sent to very obscure companies like Happy This, That, like Happy Day Inc. And after a little digging, they weren't based in the U.S., they were based in China. And these were big loans, and there was many of them. And it made me, at the time, I thought to myself, I don't think this is a mistake. I don't think there's anybody that's being inept. This is not, oh my gosh, I screwed up. This is willful. This is, oh yeah, let's steal some money, send it to Happy Days Inc. That's what that is, at least in my opinion. So I think this is the same thing. When they're saying that they found that these CEOs are 11 years old, you're going to find that, some of them are Mickey Mouse, some of them are Snoopy. They're sending it to whoever they want, to their pet dog. This is nothing but a cash grab for people who, on the other side, can take out the money, not be tracked or traced, and voila. Welcome to fraud. It's a damn shame, and we're paying for it. Anyway, I want to continue our conversation. Like I said, a lot to discuss here. Wendy's, the burger place, they have Wendy's House. It's like a nonprofit they do for orphans that are looking for adoption and whatnot. And this thing's been around for a long time. And guess who got to it? The wokeness. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
A major milestone reached for a local adoption program. The Dave Thomas Foundation announced it helped find permanent homes for 15,000 children.
And they say many of these kids grew up in the foster care system, living suitcase to suitcase, but not anymore. So the foundation says it reached that number, that goal, through its signature program called Wendy's Wonderful Kids, once it started scaling to other states. Basically, specialized recruiters work with some of the longest waiting children in foster care. And a new study shows those children are 3 times more likely to be adopted as part of it. So many of you might know Dave Thomas started the Wendy's restaurant franchise as an adopted child himself. It says that more than 140,000 children right now are in the foster care system here in North America, and they're all waiting for a place to call home.
Now, speaking of the Dave Thomas Foundation, check this out. So this thing has its roots going back into the 90s, and Dave Thomas was a known evangelical Christian supporting Republicans, and now there are radicals that are infiltrating his mission. And this is interesting, right? Back in the late 90s, you had some LGBTQ groups that were boycotting Wendy's, and they blamed Dave Thomas after the Wendy's chain pulled their sponsorship from talk show host, I should say, Ellen DeGeneres, ahead of an episode where she was going to announce that she was a lesbian. And this, he's had a history of, just holding the line on issues for, his beliefs. And now things are taking a radical turn in the wrong direction. I want to get a breakdown of what's going on here and whatever else is happening in the rest of the world with Kendall Qualls. He is from Project 21 at the National Center for Public Policy, and he's been on the program before. He's terrific. Kendall Qualls, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be back, Rich.
You bet, brother. So let's chop it up here, because I think this is interesting, right? They got to wait, kind of like Walton, right? Sam Walton was also rather conservative, and Walmart has taken this kind of leftward turn in recent years. We're seeing the same thing happen now with the Dave Thomas Foundation, the founder of Wendy's, the famous burger place. What's going on here?
Well, it's like anything. A lot of our foundational organizations and just philanthropic organizations have been infiltrated. Really, the Boy Scouts today, they're no longer even called Boy Scouts.
They call it Scouting USA or something like that.
That's right, and they have the lowest numbers of participation they've had in decades. And this is just a whole phenomenon. It's, attack those basic foundations that are core central to the foundations of our country, the values of our country.
Man, I tell you, this is some crazy stuff that's going on here. It really, really is, because we see these victories that the Trump administration is having at the governmental level, right? He's signing executive orders left and right to protect girls from men going into their sports, all sorts of things, trying to minimize wokeness and destroy DEI. But then you have just as strong a push going on in the private sector on these corporate boards once these founders go away, right? The founders, they go on to be with the Lord. And it's like, all right, it's a free for all for the lefties that are getting into these boards, and it makes me wonder. And I guess I'll posit this question to you, Kendall Qualls: Is America really going in the right direction, or am I just looking at some of this bad news and getting jaded?
No, I believe what you're seeing is an America that's reawakening to its the core foundations that we all have as Americans. Look, number one, we don't have a core bias or hatred toward any group. I think all of us believe that, if you're an adult, it's your life. You decide how you want to live your life. No harm, no foul, right? But as this whole idea of we want to extend respect, dignity, and this nature of, we're going to treat you like an equal. Well, of course, we'll do that to people that don't necessarily have my beliefs or don't live the same values that I live. But I'm going to treat you with dignity and as a human being and everything else. The issue is that goes both ways. It's a two-way street. It doesn't stop in the cul-de-sac on the other side. And what we're seeing is this whole idea of people or your biological males competing against women or men in locker rooms. There doesn't seem to be any appreciation that parents just don't want that for their children. They don't want that exposed at that level. Again, as an adults, we're all adults, and we can make those decisions. But for children, I think there's a reawakening that's happening, and I think that needle is getting back to the middle.
Kendall Qualls, I think you're right. And half the time I ask these questions, that's probably the nervous side of me that's asking questions, because my belief on this is that America is a rather conservative nation, collectively speaking. I think most people want to protect their kids. Most people don't want their kids to be super liberal, at least very early in life. I think most parents, even the most liberal among them, don't want their kids exposed to pornographic, X-rated, LGBTQ, and otherwise inappropriate reading material in early grades. Most parents, I believe, are also kind of in favor of saying, look, let's leave sex out of the classroom and let's just teach these kids to be good people and to, read and write and add and all of those things. And then you see how these boards are being taken over, and it makes me think, are they the only ones that are actively trying to take over something?
Well, at the end of the day, what's crazy about this, again, let me give you a perspective, especially here in the United States compared to other nations.
Well, Kendall, I don't want to cut you off, but we're going to have to hit a pause in a moment. So hold that thought about the perspective you're giving us in the United States on why so many leftists seem to be more active than others. And maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I am, and I hope you could set me straight on this. Folks, we're going to come right back with Kendall Qualls. He's an ambassador with the Project 21 at the National Center for Public Policy. Check out his website at kendallqualls.com. Check him out on Twitter. Some call it X, at Kendall Qualls, MN as in Minnesota. And we're going to come back to continue discussing this Dave Thomas Wendy's Foundation controversy and his perspective on what's going on in America. And are we really that leftward leaning? Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right? But right. You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Rich Valdez keeping you company until midnight, 1 a.m. in some areas. We're live, we're national, and we're continuing our conversation with Kendall Qualls. Kendall Qualls is an ambassador with the Project 21 group within the National Center for Public Policy. Kendall Qualls, we left off. My question was, why are so many lefties taking over boards and buying radio stations and doing everything they can to turn America inside out when it seems like most people are sane, most people are center-right, and most people want their kids to be well. What's your perspective?
Yeah, it's an overall agenda to drive and change the nature of our country to that very point. They know the country is I would say, a click to the right. It's not uber right. It's not uber left. It's right in the middle, one click to the right. And they want to change that. And let me give you an example. Europe has been very progressive about a lot of the transgender surgeries for even for minors. For over 10 years, they've been doing this. But in the last year or so, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and even Great Britain, they have halted and reversed and changed some of their guidelines because they found that the clinical outcomes, they're not seeing any benefit for these patients as minors as they thought they would. In fact, one of the chief medical officers, Michael Landon, he's a professor at the chief physician at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, said, for the lack of evidence that follows, we should be taking the most conservative approach, and they're starting with psychological therapy first. However, in the United States, there was a report back in October in a New York Post that a physician, an American doctor, refused to publish an NIH study, a $10 million study, because the study revealed that these trans kids that they were studying showed that puberty blockers didn't help mental health at all. The average age of the kids in this study was 9 years old.
Wow.
She hid this report for 8 years because she didn't want it to be what she called weaponized against their agenda. So in Europe, where they're trying to do the best things for the kids, in the United States, they're hiding the evidence to drive a political agenda and using our kids as guinea pigs.
Such a shame. And, you know, while I think there's a reprieve going on right now, I don't think it's retaliation, right? They're not retreating. The left is just slowing down because they're, I think, regrouping, re-strategizing, trying to figure out how to best attack this again. Ultimately, I don't think they ever relent. In my opinion, Kendall, I think that what we're going to see here is just the left continually reinvent themselves in order to get their way, to get their hands on our children. Your thoughts?
Well, let me give you an idea. Again, this is happening right now in our public schools. This agenda that they're pushing, DEI agenda. They're teaching a lot of this transgender stuff in elementary schools, pre-puberty, by the way, and so especially in inner city schools and in the black community, the academic achievement has been this lowest level even before the civil rights movement. Literally, during segregated schools, our black kids were performing better then than they are now in a lot of our major cities because they're driving a political agenda. They're not teaching basic academics anymore. They're training these kids to be social justice warriors, while we as black Americans are at the lowest level and socially we've ever been. I mean, 80% of our children are born with no fathers in the home, where, again, pre-Civil War was 80% two-parent families. They're driving an agenda regardless of what happens, the collateral damage, and they're doing it to divide our country and to drive it leftward to be their number one priority agenda. And there's evidence to prove that. It's absolutely sad. I'll give you one example. And in your neck of the woods in Delaware, as well as the state of California, they lowered the bar exams to advance this whole idea of equity or DEI. And they said, well, it's been unfair, systemically racist. Well, I'm going to tell you, black Americans have been passing the bar exams for the 1800s. We have an elementary school problem, high school problem. We don't have a bar exam problem.
Right. That's true. That's true. Now, Kendall, excellent point. I want to make sure we have time to talk about the great work that you're doing with Project 21 over at the National Center. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know, this Project 21 has been around for a long time, and it's a voice of what we call the conservative blacks in America. In fact, the vast majority of black Americans, the poll that was done on the Supreme Court justice's decision to eliminate race as a classification for admission into colleges. The majority of Black Americans agreed with that decision. However, you would never know it by listening to the news media. The majority of Black Americans want school choice. The majority of Black Americans believe that federal dollars should incentivize two-parent families instead of incentivizing single-parent homes. However, leadership will never have that. They don't support any of those initiatives because they're far left, and you won't hear that in the media or academia at all. So someone has to be that voice of reason, and that's what Project 21 is about.
Outstanding. Now, let everybody know how they can follow you online, how they can find you, and how they can learn more about your work with the National Center and Project 21.
Sure. So me personally is Kendall Qualls. That's Kendall, QUALLS.com. And basically our notion is this, that the promise of America is available to everyone, regardless of race. There is a formula for this country to be successful. If you follow that formula, it's very simple. It's just basically work hard, get a good education. It could be the trades or college. Either one, it doesn't matter. You're not a second-class citizen if you go in the trades. Get a job, get married, and then have children. If you follow that success sequence, you'll have a 95% chance of staying out of poverty and have a successful life. And if you're faith-based, if you're a Christian, again, follow the formula that God has laid out, you'll find prosperity there. So we are a big proponent of those basic foundational values that made our country great, that made this people great, the greatest nation in the history of mankind. And it has nothing to do with skin color, ethnicity, or anything. It has a lot to do with values and beliefs and a God-oriented philosophy.
Outstanding. Folks, give him a follow. Kendall Qualls, thanks for being with us. I hope to check in with you again really soon. Keep doing what you're doing, and Godspeed, my man.
Thank you, Rich. Take care.
You bet. And amigos, we continue with your calls and more straight ahead. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
When we see the benefits of the planning you say is underway?
Look, I think President Trump said that he'll own the economy in 6 or 12 months, but I can tell you that we are working to get these prices down every day, but it took 4 years to get us here, and we've had 5 weeks. So interest rates are down. That's a very good start toward housing affordability, toward auto affordability. And we are tackling this. At Treasury, we are going to appoint an affordability czar. We are going to have an affordability council. We are laser focused on this.
What does that mean? What's an affordability czar?
Someone who picks the 5 or 8 areas where this administration can make a big difference for working class Americans.
That is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on last week's Sunday shows on Face the Nation, indicating that, look, you got to give us some time. We're approaching, month number 2. We're in the fifth week, maybe going on the 6th week. So as we hit the 45-day mark, I think the president's making some progress, but by no means is it what he's kind of outlined, that it's going to take us the first 6 months or a year to get our hands around this, especially given the spending that was done prior to him coming into office. But the Democrats are in free fall. They're out there saying you're losing your shirt, you're losing this, and you're losing that. Let's go to Jerome, Charleston, South Carolina, WTMA. What lies do you have for us today?
Hey, I believe it was Robert De Niro who once said, I love the smell of a recession in the morning. Okay? Recession today, recession tomorrow, recession forever. Give me liberty or give me a recession. Boy, is he a financial genius or what? Just taking up, just bury the economy, Donald. Keep doing it. The orange man, keep burying the economy, Donald. Keep on
Let me tell you, Jerome, I think that the orange man has his finger on the pulse like you wouldn't believe. And over the weekend, the president saying there's going to be a period of transition because he's got a lot of things up his sleeve, per se, because he knows it's going to get rocky before it gets better. And, they're trying to have the softest landing here possible with all the spending that Biden did. But Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, he minced no words. He said that on NBC News just yesterday, he said, quote, there's going to be no recession in America. So there you have it, Jerome. At least that's coming from Secretary Lutnick. Scott Bessent, again, saying that the market and the economy have become hooked. They've become addicted to excessive government spending. And there's going to be a detox period. So, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to detox from all of your tax and spendism. All right, Jerome? This is all your fault. You and your friends. You and your girlfriend, Kamala.
We got no time for detox. We got a recession. Hey, thanks, Republicans. Thanks, Rich Valdez. Thank you, Orange Man. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to be able to pin this on me or anybody else on our side because it's just happening too quickly, too soon. Now, it'll be something that you believe because, you love the taste of that Democrat Kool-Aid. But I think the majority of America is going to see it, and we're going to come out on the other side. I really do believe that. And I think the creation of the United States Crypto Reserve is a good step in the right direction. I think the stability that we're seeing amongst some of those currencies and crypto coins that President Trump named as part of our U.S. Crypto Reserve, where they've kind of made it a clearinghouse or a collection of everything that the government has from seized assets and wherever. I think this is good stuff. It's a step in the right direction. But thank you for your call, brother. Feel free to call me back and peddle some more of your half-truths. And that's Jerome, folks. WTMA in the building. And some of the analysts, and this is according to Breitbart, are blaming the downturn in stocks with respect to Trump's tariffs. Listen, a lot of people are saying that. And it could be that some of these big investors might be a little skittish. But ultimately, we're looking at a 5%, let's see, I'll give it right here, 4.34%. Let's see, 3.54%. These are not huge numbers, but definitely something that concerns people. And when you look again, and I was looking at it earlier, I wish I could find it now, but I don't. But you can do the math yourself. Just look at where we were a year ago. We're up 8 or 9% from where we were a year ago, even though we're down 4 or 5% today from a month ago, right, per se. So this is not great, but it's not horrible. And I think this is being blown out of proportion, my opinion. And I think I said it on the air. I just bought some crypto recently, right? When this time comes, and like I said in the other hour, we can reiterate it here. I had a conversation with E.J. Antoni, I don't know, at least 90 days ago, where we discussed Elon Musk saying something like, yes, exactly, correct, whatever, to somebody saying there will be a recession early in 2025. And Musk agreeing with that. And the logic is simple. This was before Trump had even taken office. The reason this is expected is because government spending fuels inflation. And inflation will fuel a recession. And it really is that simple. If we don't get this stuff under control quicker, it's going to happen. And economies are, as I don't have to tell anybody listening, this is real life, right? When you have a bunch of bills and you're trying to pay your bills, there's but so much you can do. If you make your minimum payment only, eventually your debt service isn't enough to eliminate your debt, right? You can't really pay down your debt by making the minimum payment, right? So for you to pay down a credit card or whatever line of credit or whatever debt you might have, your car note, you've got to pay, right? You have to make more than the minimum payment. You got to double up sometimes. You've got to send a little extra. And that's what Trump is figuring out right now how to do. How do we bring more money into the United States? Whether it's through these different initiatives like tariffs, whether it's through the minerals deal with Zelensky. I mean, he's got so many ideas, which, quite frankly, I got to give him a lot of credit for. He's mentioning more ideas than I've heard the Democrats talk about. So, anyway, your calls and more. We got Chicago, Georgia, Idaho, and more. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, it is the speed round. Open phones across America. Let us go to the phones right now. Let's see. Here we go. Steve, Atlanta, Georgia, WGKA. Quickly, speed round. Go for it.
Thanks for taking my call, Mr. Valdez. There was a radio show right before yours. He was only on for an hour, and he seemed to think that the people who are protesting in the universities against the Jews, and keeping them from school and like locking down the university, that they had the same constitutional rights as Americans, and they couldn't be kicked out as by the president as foreign nationals. And what's your opinion on that?
So, well, my opinion doesn't matter as much as the facts, right? I think that these are valid arguments, right? If I were a judge, I'd say, okay, sure, we could hear that. And then I'd say, and here's the deal. The problem with anything is, with these things, and I don't want to get into too deep in this, but you don't have, you're entitled to rights while you're in the United States. This is true. However, you're not allowed to be a resident of this country and come here and disrupt and cause violence. And that's what this guy wasn't arrested for free speech, right? For speaking his mind. He was violated. He was arrested for creating violence on a campus and for creating a terroristic situation where people were harmed and fleeing for safety and hiding until the cops could rescue them or until they could escape, like what happened at Columbia University. So that's very, very different. And, it just happens to be today I was at lunch with somebody who's a convict, and he had committed a felony and was telling me about a friend of his that was in jail with him. And the guy said, oh, yeah, hopefully when I get out of here, I'll be able to go back home with my wife. And he was like, but you're not a citizen, and you're a resident. And he said, if you have a green card and you're in this country and you get arrested, guess what happens the day you get released? You get deported. And that's a fact. Biden was kind of, lackadaisical on that, but it's happening all over again. So I think this is what's happening. It kind of violates the rules of your conditions of being a resident when you do stuff like that. So I think the law is on Trump's side here. Steve in Atlanta, thank you. Amigos, we continue. Hasta la próxima. Don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. This is another action-packed hour of conversation, analysis, and your reactions to the news of the day, current events, and everything else going on in America at night. Our phone number, if you want to join us on our late-night national town hall conversation, feel free. The number is 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ, and it's 7 minutes after 11 o'clock New York time. That's nighttime here, East Coast time. And so much is going on today. I want to talk about a lot of things. Daylight savings time hitting people yesterday. Hit me. I was late to church. It was a whole thing for me. You'd think at 46 I'd be able to handle a simple time change, but not so much. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But I want to start off with what's happening domestically here, because El Trumpito, Donaldus Magnus, the 45th and 47th president of these United States, has done it yet again. What Biden meant for evil, Trump has turned for good. And this time it's the CBP-1 app. Remember that app that Biden made so that people could bypass the border and just, bypassing the official ports of entry for asylum seekers? If they were to just go on the app and say, hey, look, I'm looking for asylum. Here's my this, here's my that, boom, and just come right in. It's streamlined the invasion, if you will, at the border. Well, it's been renamed by the Trump administration. It's now called the CBP Home app because you're going home. And it's been designed now for people to self-deport. Listen to this report from Bill Malugin, Fox News.
The Trump administration has taken that controversial CBP-1 cell phone app for migrants that the Biden administration was using, and they've repurposed it into a self-deportation app that is officially launching today. The app is now called CBP Home. It allows illegal aliens in the U.S. to register to self-deport. They fill out biographical information, including their countries of citizenship, which country they plan to return to, their alien registration numbers, their contact information, and it allows them to upload photos of themselves to confirm their identity. All of it is then submitted to CBP, and they leave the country. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why would an illegal immigrant want to self-deport? Well, DHS says if they leave now, they will have the opportunity to return to the U.S. legally in the future and chase the American dream. But if they don't leave, they will be found, arrested, detained, and deported with a permanent ban on entry into the United States.
Permanent ban on entry into the United States. And listen, I know a couple of kids. Listen, I didn't grow up in a really rough part of anything, right? Moved from Brooklyn to New Jersey to a pretty nice area, very middle class, North Bergen, West New York area, Hudson County. But I did go to high school with a couple of kids that got influenced the wrong way and decided to do things they probably should not have done, like an armed robbery. And two of those kids were charged as adults, even though they were minors. They were 17 when they did this. Very, very foolish thing. They'd never done anything like that before. And were sentenced to, I think, 3 years in prison for their role in this. And I can tell you this, that on their last day, when they left jail, each of them, one of them had been in this country since he was 6 months old, and the other one since he was 2 years old. And each of them was deported to their country of origin. Countries they didn't know, because they had been in this country since they were infants. And there was no DACA to help them. There was no Obama bending the rules. They were deported. And they went on to live and make their lives in these respective countries because, like the report said, you get banned from coming back. Now, I think their ban at the time was 20 years. So they had to wait 20 years in order to come back. And they did. And guess what? They both became incredibly successful back home, and then even came back here and opened additional businesses here. And then they're able to now travel freely. They've paid their debt to society, and they're, parents and responsible people. But the point of the story here is not about my boys that made mistakes and turned their lives around. But moreover, the larger point here is that the Trump administration is using the CBP-1 app, now renamed the CBP Home app, and using it for people who want to self-deport or face Tom Homan. I think a lot of people want to avoid Tom Homan. And Jasmine Crockett weighed in on a lot of this stuff, and we're going to get that to you later. But what I want to play for you here is what happened with this guy, Khalil, right? Is that his name? Khalil, am I saying it right? Khalil, what's his last name? Mahmoud Khalil, because he was labeled a national security threat. Now, who is this guy? He's a guy that was sympathetic to the terrorist group Hamas and incited violence on the campus of Columbia University. And I don't know if you remember, there was one of the janitors there was caught up like hostage inside one of these buildings, and others were as well, and many people were injured during these very violent, they want to call them protests, but they were riots and takeovers of these buildings. And this man was arrested, Mahmoud Khalil. He was arrested by ICE because they're now, I guess, going to attempt to revoke his green card because of his involvement. And this happened again on information that was provided by Secretary Rubio, indicating that this person is a threat to our current national security. Now, critics say, he's not a threat to anything. You just don't like him. But I think there's more to it than meets the eye. Listen to this.
Free Mahmoud Khalil! No!
They yelled Mahmoud Khalil's name outside of Columbia University, a fellow pro-Palestinian protester now in ICE custody.
I think that the students have a right to their free speech on campus.
I think anybody who supports interests that are anti-American, pro-terror, anti-Semitic, and is not a U.S. citizen can be deported.
The former Columbia University Students' Weekend arrest coming after months of being the face of discontent on campus. He was among those organizing and speaking to the media when students pitched tents and refused to leave after the Israel-Hamas war broke out. On Saturday, federal agents took Khalil into custody from a student housing apartment. His attorney telling News 4 that Khalil is a permanent resident and green card holder.
We are going to eradicate anti-Semitic behavior.
President Donald Trump echoing the same sentiment on social media, saying more arrests are coming, writing, "We will find, apprehend, and deport these terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again." Khalil was originally taken into federal custody to a facility in New Jersey. His 8-month pregnant wife, who is an American citizen, went to visit him, only to learn he was no longer there. ICE confirms that he's currently in Louisiana at the Jana LaSalle detention facility, the database listing his home country of birth as Syria. Meanwhile, his attorneys are working to free him, and they're stressing he is not charged with a crime. Erica Byfield, News 4, New York.
So what is going on here? Because the left is quick to say, well, this guy was in America, he's a green card holder, and he was exercising his First Amendment rights to free speech. That's fine, but that's not why they arrested him. They arrested him for what they are alleging are his involvement and activities that were tied to Hamas, a terrorist group that has been wreaking havoc on our ally in the Middle East. Those are two different things, right? If you are involved with terrorists and you are supporting terrorists, it's one thing. Now, I can understand how they could say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're arresting this man just because he doesn't agree with you politically. How dare you? He's a Syrian national that identifies as a Palestinian. But those might be facts, right? He may be born in Syria and identify as a Palestinian, or maybe his parents were born in Palestine. That's fine. What I'm talking about is he's been arrested for taking over buildings, creating illegal encampments, and plaguing students at multiple campuses across the country. He was the ringleader, Mahmoud Khalil. So the question is not, was he arrested for protesting? No. No, he's being arrested for alleged involvement that's linked to Hamas, a known terrorist organization. That is why he's been arrested and labeled a national security threat. And for that, they can potentially revoke his green card and have him leave the country. So it's not to be conflated or misunderstood, because we don't want to give credence to the false assertion that if we don't like what you're saying, you're going to jail. On the contrary, I would say that was the Biden administration that was shutting people up and attempting to put moms in jail because of their stance on LGBTQ issues. That's a far cry from being linked to a terrorist group. So that's the story with that. And we'll continue to get your calls and reactions on that, as well as daylight savings. What does this actually do to your brain? I want to talk to somebody with a PhD that knows what's going on here, because I can tell you, I like it. I'm a little bit happier. There's a little more pep in my step when the sun is out a little longer. When it gets dark early, 4 or 5 o'clock, like it does in the winter, I can tell you, I'm not sad. I'm just like, I feel slighted. Like, hey, you're robbing a couple hours of my day, and I don't like it one bit. Anyway, we're going to talk about that, so much more, and your calls, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you've worked so hard in the industry, and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
DST, Daylight Saving Time. And you may have heard that Ben Franklin created DST. In reality, he wrote a satirical essay suggesting that Parisians could save on candles if they just got up a little earlier and made use of the morning light. He was really proposing they change their sleep schedule, not time itself. The Uniform Time Act went into effect in 1967 here in the U.S., standardizing time in our country. It created a nationwide daylight saving time schedule in spring and fall. The law allows states to opt out of the schedule and remain on standard time all year round, which is why Hawaii, most of Arizona, and U.S. territories do not change their clocks.
That's Tanya Rivera, WFMY News 2 in Greensboro, giving us a little history on daylight saving time. And, of course, this is something I was just complaining about, right? What's the big deal with daylight saving time? Well, nothing's really a big deal about it until we figure out, is something really happening to people, right? Years ago, there was this thing called SAD, right? Seasonal affective disorder, where people would get depressed. And I always thought, you know what, that's in their head. It's got to be something in their head. And as I got older, I realized I'm a lot happier when there's more sunshine. I don't know if it's the vitamin D, the warmth that you could feel on your skin, just the fact that, there's more hours in the day, it seems. I don't know. Maybe I'm onto something, maybe not. But I want to talk to our guest because Leigh Richardson is a licensed professional counselor. She has a doctorate in psychology and a master's in counseling. She's the founder of the Brain Performance Center and the Brain Performance Institute. Leigh Richardson, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So what's going on here? Are people really dealing with mental health issues as a result of daylight saving time?
Absolutely they are. When we think about it, oh, come on, it's just an hour. Go to bed 15 minutes earlier for a couple of nights. Get used to it. It's just an hour. It's not that big a deal. But Rich, 1/3 of Americans have a problem with their sleep cycle when everything's going their way. So you mix it up, and that makes it even harder. And I hope that we're finally starting to understand is that the body keeps score of everything going on in the brain. And our sleep cycle is set in our brain by the circadian rhythm. And it tells us when it's going to get dark, and then our brain will start to kick out melatonin. And, a lot of people take melatonin as a supplement to help them sleep. It works for some it doesn't. But when you think about it, all day long, those neurons and dendrites are wiring and firing. And as they do that, they're creating this toxic waste in the brain. When you go to sleep, key time, those little glial cells come out and they clean up that mess. So if you're not going to sleep, what are you leaving in the brain? And if you're not going to sleep, how is your body, starting to wind down? The statistics of what happens on a physical level after daylight savings time is pretty substantial.
Yeah, well, I didn't know much about that, but I've only heard about it. In your practice, is this something that you see regularly? Do you see it a lot, or is it kind of an anomaly?
Well, I work with a fair amount of those, 1/3 of those Americans that have sleep problems anyway. Mm-hmm. I work with a lot of those, so I do see it a lot. And it's not being able, you get up the next morning and you've got that brain fog, and when your brain is moving slow, so is your body. When you're having a hard time just processing what's going on around you, one of the things that they notice is increased traffic accidents. And I could see that linking. Well, if you can't process and react very quickly to what's going on around you, those delayed responses can have disturbing consequences. And when our brain is out of whack, for a less technical way to say it, but when it gets out of whack, our heart starts beating faster. Anytime that autonomic nervous system gets disrupted, we start riding the roller coaster. Fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, freeze. And when we do that, our adrenal glands start kicking out all that cortisol. And that gets that adrenaline going, and we get that rush. That makes our heart beat faster. That can certainly point in the direction of heart attacks or strokes. So going back to my one point, the body keeps score of everything going on in the brain. This is one unit. It's not like we have a brain upstairs and a body downstairs.
Right. They work kind of hand in hand. Folks, we're on with Dr. Leigh Richardson. LeighRichardson.com is the website. And Dr. Leigh Richardson, if you'll indulge me, I'd love to talk with you a little bit more, because it seems like people that are dealing with the, the angst or the issues related to the changes with daylight saving time, that perhaps they need to focus on resilience, right? On how to kind of get past that a little bit. And I'd love to get your take on, what you recommend for people that are feeling challenged. People that are listening to this right now saying, you know what, I don't like that either. That's a tough one for me, the daylight savings time, or sleeping and having healthy sleep in general. So, folks, we're coming right back, as long as she can stay, with Dr. Leigh Richardson. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
I just have to thank you for doing what you do every night and opening up that mic and hearing from Americans, letting them express their opinions, and really giving people a voice. So God bless you for what you're doing, my friend.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez live with you till midnight and 1 a.m. in some areas. We continue our discussion on daylight saving time. And my hope is that one day we'll elect someone somewhere that will say, we're just not going to do that anymore. And we're just going to allow the day to be long forever. I don't know if I'm going to get my way or not, but I want to continue our discussion with Dr. Leigh, because she brought up something interesting, that life is already challenging for people. And when you don't have to change the time, and when you do, it adds insult to injury. And that made a lot of sense to me, because, I deal with this stuff, being up late and whatnot, and sleep is always an issue. I take melatonin, I take magnesium, I take ashwagandha root. I'm doing all sorts of natural stuff, including, my daily workout in the gym to make sure I'm nice and tired after I get jacked up on coffee before the show. So I understand what it's like to have a weird schedule. But there are some people where this really messes them up because, unlike me, they can't sleep late, right? They can't make their own schedule during the daytime. So, Dr. Leigh, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and sticking around with us. And talk to us about how people can become more resilient, or those that are listening to the program right now that feel affected by daylight savings time, or really just having general issues with sleep. What do they do?
Well, and thank you for bringing up resilience, because resilience isn't just about being cognitively strong. It's emotional and it's social. And we all have a relationship with our sleep. Some of us worry about it. Some of us treasure it. Some of us disrespect it. We don't have a sleep cycle. So when you talk about resilience, stop and think about what's your relationship with your sleep. You mentioned when you came back the things that you do with magnesium and the melatonin to try to keep your sleep in balance. And that's a great example of what people can do. And my guess is that you pay pretty close attention to it. You monitor how you feel. You monitor your physical fitness as well as your mental fitness. Doing the job you do work some crazy hours. And maybe that forces you to have that step in place. And I think that we all can. Even people that work the normal 9 to 5, we're creatures of habit. We get acclimated to doing things one way. Oh, this is the way we do it. And all of a sudden, you tell me, I had one client say, daylight savings, okay, that means I'm going to have to eat dinner at a different time that day. Mm-hmm. That means I'm going to have to change this. That means I'm like, no, it really, really doesn't. It's, we put that in our head. It's the anticipation of the change that I think has a big impact. And so I think for my favorite saying this year has been on daylight savings time is, we always find what we're looking for. So let's look for the good associated with the daylight savings time. Because
that's such a good line.
When I work till 6:30 or 7 and I come home and it's pitch black and all I think is I need to put my PJs on, I need to start going to bed. I'm excited to come home at 6:30 or 7 and say, maybe I'll grab the dogs and take a walk around the block.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You feel like, you got a little extra time to do a few extra things. And I think you're right. And it really, for me, it is all about brain performance, right? If I don't sleep enough, or if I don't, caffeinate enough, or if I don't exercise enough, or whatever it is, my brain doesn't work enough. And there's days where you all have probably heard it on the radio when I skip one of those steps. So, I get that. And I think that I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people, whether it's work related or not, that have either issues with sleep or need to sleep less or aren't able to sleep. So those are very, very important things. Now, for the people that are a step further, when it's not just sleep and they're sad, or they're feeling down about, or they're anxious because they've had to change their schedule, like the example you said, oh my gosh, am I going to eat at a different time? I could see that would set me off for sure. If I don't do everything in my life at the same time every day, like a radio person, we count seconds in this business. I'm off. I don't like a lot of spontaneity. I have to kind of work on a schedule. So when somebody's schedule's interrupted and they're messed up about it, what's your advice for them?
Well, I tell everybody you always need to have a plan B, because you're going to have setbacks. Things are going to change. Traffic is going to be extremely difficult. Your boss is going to call you in right when you picked up your bag and you're ready to walk out that door. So what's your plan B? And know what that plan B is. And it can be as simple as, I'm going to stop. I'm going to take 3 long, slow, deep breaths and allow myself to adapt and to adjust to what's going on around me. Focus on what you can control. You cannot control those unexpected disruptions that I don't wish them on you, but they're going to come your way.
Yeah, that's inevitable, right? So, Dr. Leigh, that's a good insight for when those things come your way. Have a plan B, and I guess any advice for those who fail to find a plan B when they're freaking out. What should they do?
Well, stop. Take more than 3 deep breaths. Maybe take 5 to 7 slow, deep breaths, because when you slow your breath rate, you slow your heart rate. And when you slow your heart rate down, you calm the body down.
Excellent. Words of wisdom from Dr. Leigh Richardson. Now, Doc, let everybody know how they can find you, how they can follow you, and keep up to speed with all the great work you're doing.
They can find us a good old-fashioned way, the website. It's drleighrichardson.com and the brainperformancecenter.com, and that's on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on LinkedIn. And I encourage everybody, there's a lot of good information on those websites, a lot of good information even in the blog, so check me out.
Folks, check her out, drleighrichardson.com, thebrainperformancecenter.com. Dr. Leigh Richardson, thank you for being with us and kind of, talking us off the ledge here about daylight saving time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. Talk soon. God bless. And amigos, we come back with your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America, and you sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, open phones across America. Rich Valdez with you till midnight, 1 a.m. in some areas. And let's go to the phones. I want to go to Nick in Chicago, Illinois, WLS in the building. Go right ahead, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you to people who listen to me. I want to talk about Ukraine, as I mentioned to your call screener, and I'll try to keep it brief. Stalin punished the Ukrainian people with a famine, killing millions because the Ukrainians wanted to be independent and not be a colony of the communist USSR, also called the Soviet Union. We come to our present day, Putin is like Stalin number 2. Putin wants to keep Ukraine under control there. It's necessary for him to have a Ukraine that's part of the Soviet or the former Soviet Union, which I'm sure he wants to rebuild it again. And what the problem is that when Yanukovych, which was Putin's handpicked choice to run for president of Ukraine, when he mysteriously won, and people expected when a trade deal was going to be announced that it would be between Ukraine and the EU. Instead, no big surprise to anybody outside of Ukraine, it was between Ukraine and Russia. So Ukrainians are tired of being a colony again. The corruption that exists in Ukraine came from Russia, which is also a very corrupt country, and this is what we have now, this giant mess.
Well, listen, I get it. I agree with you. I think Putin is following in Stalin's footsteps as well. I think a lot of people disagree with me, and they think he's fantastic and that he is the great white hope and that he is here to defend Christianity and heterosexuality and save the West and all these things that people believe about him. I think a lot of those beliefs come from him and his own propaganda machines. But what do I know? So, Nick, thanks for your call, brother. I appreciate it. Shout out to WLS Chicago, Illinois. Let us continue. Where do I go from here? Who's next in line? We've got Joe, Salem, Oregon. KSAR. Go for it, Joe.
Thank you, Rich. You said earlier that you've never been thrown out of a church. Most people haven't, but I've been thrown out of more churches than bars.
What are you doing?
What am I doing? What I did was I stayed with 3 different churches with my mother till I left home at 17, and I thought I'm going to frequent each church I can find, a different one every week, and see what they have to teach there biblically. And I took issue with doctrinal teachings that they had, and I like to talk to people. So I talked to people about it, and they said, "Oh, you're going to cause a revolution if you can come and be quiet." I said, "Well, don't you have freedom of speech here inside the church as well as outside?" And they said, "Well, we just don't want to upset our congregation with certain issues like that." But
so you were probably, hitting them where it hurt. And the reality is, and this is the same as the Colin Kaepernick controversy, is our free speech really is only limited to the public square. We don't have it at work. We don't have it in a lot of places that aren't the public square. But I get it. Listen, I get it. And I think a lot of churches will welcome the theological debate as long as it's time to have one, not during a Sunday service, not during time that's already planned or allocated for something else. But I think most heads of the church, whether it's the pastor, the senior pastor or whatnot, I think that they would go for it. But what do I know? I've never really taken exception like that deeply. But interesting point, Joe. Thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate it. Shout out to KSAR. And we continue. Raymond, Roseburg, Oregon, KQEN. Raymond, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, I just was watching the news a couple of weeks ago, and I've tried to call you a few times ever since. And I seen that Sheryl Crow sold her Tesla. And I was really surprised President Trump didn't get up there and make a state of emergency speech about it. I mean, it's a big deal, It's a big deal.
Well, it's funny when the liberals are selling their Teslas, they thought these electric vehicles were going to save the world and save the environment. And now that they don't like Elon Musk, people are trying to get out of them and they're attacking them. There has been a bunch of violent attacks on Teslas all over the place. And I thought that was pretty funny. I was looking at something. Let me see where it was. I think it might have been on Breitbart News, where there's apparently an uptick in crimes against Teslas. People are trying to set them on fire. There are dealerships that they're going after. It's all the rage, as one would say. So, funny point you make, but it's a true thing that people really are attacking dealerships and focusing on, destroying these Teslas, something that they once thought was, I would say, the path to salvation for our country. Now they're saying, we don't like Tesla because we don't like Musk. Isn't it funny what a day makes, right? Raymond in Roseburg, Oregon, KQEN. Thank you for your call, my brother. And amigos, we continue straight ahead. By the way, Canada has a new prime minister. We'll get into that and more when we return.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
We have made this the greatest country in the world. And now... And now our neighbors want to take us.
Nos voisins veulent nous annexer.
No way. No way.
So that is Mark Carney. He's won the internal party vote for his party, likely making him the next prime minister without a full vote of the people, seemingly. having won 85.9% of the vote from his party members there. And he beat out former finance minister and deputy prime minister Chrystia Freeland. Former cabinet minister Karina Gould, businessman and former member of parliament Frank Bayless, all by around between 3 and 8%. So he seems to be the guy. And he says to El Trompito and the Americans, Canada is not available to you. So I want to get your thoughts and reactions on what's going on with this man, Mr. Mark Carney, new incoming potential prime minister. Let's go to our buddy Antonio, calling us from WVMT by way of Montreal. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for taking my call. And, today is an interesting day in Canada, a country that declares itself a democracy, constitutional monarchy, and a respect of the Constitution of Canada that was repatriated from England back in 1981 when the original Trudeau did so. But we now have the former bank executive or exchequer president of the English Bank for 10 years running our country because he was a consultant to the younger Trudeau. So his only foray into Canadian politics was he was a backroomer. He's a World Economic Council promoter and signatory. And he's a person that has zero respect from conservative people in Canada because he never won an elected office in his entire life. He's never been in municipal politics or provincial politics or in federal politics. And
Tony, people felt like that about Trump in 2016 when he won.
The only difference is that Trump is a businessman, and this guy is a parasite on the public purse. He ran public purse, and he ran the English system, monetary system, into the ground and created an inflationary system in England. And he is despised by most English politicians.
Well, you know what? It sounds like he's a perfect successor to Justin Trudeau. I mean, it sounds like birds of a feather flocking together, Tony. Thanks for your call, my brother. I want to go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI, very quickly.
Yes, thanks, Rich. I did want to comment on the guy that they hauled in today that was the instigator of the riots.
Yes.
There at, I think they could get him for some civil rights violations on top. And if you look at Brown versus Board of Education, you'll see similarities there that look exactly like that.
Huh, interesting. I'll definitely take a look at it. I don't see, they're not jumping off the page to me, but, I'm running on fumes right about now. Paul, KBOI, thank you, my brother. And let's go to William, Morehead City, North Carolina, WTKF for the win, quickly.
Yes, I wish I could. I'll be as brief as I can. Please look into what happened just a couple of days ago with the once proud Boy Scouts of America. They are no longer the Boy Scouts of America. They are now, and please, I want you to look into this. I am an Eagle Scout honor of the...
Yeah, well, it's been a while. If it's about the name change, they changed their name a while back for inclusivity. They want to be more inclusive of what's going on. They gave in to the woke mafia. William, thanks for the call. Shout out to WTKF. James in Coos Bay, KUGN. James in Danbury, WLAD. Sorry, we got to go. The music means they're kicking me out. Hasta la próxima. Until the next time, America. Take care. Good night. And God bless you. I'm Rich Valdez.